good afternoon. Welcome to our side event on raising the bar for climate ambition, for climate action, and how co-benefits can fuel NDC ambition. My name is Frauke Röser from NewClimate Institute. We are co-organizing this event with our friends at the Institute of Advanced Sustainability Studies in Germany. They are here online virtually. And we wanted to share kind of some insights from our work on two projects that we are working on respectively, the Co-Benefits project and Ambition to Action, both funded by the International Climate Initiative of the German government. And yeah, so in the next good hour, we just wanted to take a look at co-benefits and in how far assessment of impacts and understanding of co-benefits can drive climate ambition more broadly, looking also specifically at employment, and then zooming in to Kenya. And I'm very happy to be joined here by two representatives from the Kenyan government and civil society, who I will introduce a bit later. We will have some short input presentations from Sebastian Heinberger, who is online, and Ulrike Lehr from IRENA, as well as my colleague Harry Farnihoff here, also on stage. We will then have a time for a panel discussion and hopefully some Q&A also. But before going into the main part of the event, I'm also very happy to welcome Philipp Behrens here on the stage to give us some opening remarks. Philipp is head of the division at the German Ministry of Environment, responsible for the International Climate Initiative, which, as you probably, or most of you are aware, funds many projects and initiatives on climate action around the world. So with that, over to you, Philipp.
Thank you very much, Frauke. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the NewClimate Institute and the Institute of Advanced Sustainability Studies for inviting me to this event. And I would like to welcome all of you on behalf of the German Ministry for the Environment, the BMU, and the International Climate Initiative, the IKI. In this impressive meeting room, I must say I'm used to the German pavilion, and who knows the German pavilion knows that we are sitting with 4 people in one aquarium-like room, and so it's great to be here. I've really missed that. So NewClimate and IASS are the lead organizations that implement the two very relevant IKI projects, Ambition to Action, or A2A, and co-benefits. A2A is active in Argentina, Indonesia, Thailand, and Kenya, while co-benefits works in India, Kenya, Mexico, South Africa, Turkey, and Vietnam. And those are all countries which are very relevant for the work of the BMU and also for the IKI. The IKI is BMU's main funding instrument for international projects in climate protection and also biodiversity. And we have been founded in 2008, and we are aiming especially to promote and support our member states with regards to NDC, NDC implementation, and also NDC updating. And we are working together with them on a bilateral level, but also on a multilateral level. For example, we have quite some strong partners there, like the NDC Partnership or the UNDP Climate Promise. And we have some initiatives as well to promote ambition raising. And one example would be the NAMA facility. I don't know if you are aware of that, but yesterday we were lucky enough to launch the second call of the NAMA Facility Ambition Initiative, which is a call which is directed only towards those countries that updated their NDC and by doing so also increased their ambition. So the idea is to support those countries in implementing ambitious NDCs, and by doing so also supporting the local and nationwide economies. We know that the transformation towards net zero societies will only be achievable if we interlink climate targets and action with economic and social co-benefits. Designing and facilitating climate-positive development pathways will be needed in the upcoming years. And in this context, we are extremely proud and grateful that two successful projects of the IKI, namely A2A and Co-Benefits, have joined forces to offer tools and analysis of the social, economic and environmental benefits of ambitious sectoral climate change mitigation in several of our main partner countries, particularly in Kenya. Through a range of connected measures like this event, both projects facilitate international mutual learning and capacity building among the international community working on climate change, including policymakers, knowledge partners like NGOs and scientific organizations, and multipliers. This is really great, and it's exactly the kind of exchange which we wish to see between our IKI projects. The Co-Benefits project is building capacities among expert organizations and government agencies worldwide to identify country-specific co-benefits of climate action with renewable energy. It also provides important inputs to our government strategies and dialogues. And I would like to highlight the project's this year's COP briefing series to making the Paris Agreement a success for the planet and the people. At country level, the Ambition to Action project offers analytical support to partner countries to accelerate the revision and implementation of their NDCs. The project focuses on the articulation and the social and economic benefits of mitigation to inform sector strategies and planning. Concretely, Ambition to Action develops methodologies and tools for the assessment of wider impacts. For example, the project developed open source tools to quantify employment impacts of mitigation action in electricity supply sector, quantify air pollution and health benefits in electricity in this sector, and assess linkages between climate action and SDGs. And those have been successfully applied in the partner countries and beyond. Efforts like these are a highly valuable contribution to support our partners worldwide with the implementation and ambition raising of NDCs. I'm therefore very much looking forward to the launch of the NDC Update Report 21, as well as the Co-Benefits Factsheet series. And once again, thank you very much for inviting me and for your efforts and hosting this very interesting and relevant side event at this COP. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you very much, Philip, for the opening remarks. I would now like to hand the virtual mic to Sebastian Heinberger, who is at the Institute of Advanced Sustainability Studies in Potsdam, to give us kind of a broader panorama on co-benefits and their role in driving climate ambition. Sebastian is the research group leader at the IASS and directs the global co-benefits projects, which was just introduced. Over to you, Sebastian.
Thank you, Frauke, and also thanks to Philip for your kind opening remarks. I'm very happy to give some framing thoughts to this today's session, which hopefully also provides some useful inputs to the presentation later on, to the panel discussion later on. I would kindly ask to switch to the next slide, please. So the co-benefits narrative, which we also know as the Sustainable Development Benefit or SD benefit, play a critical role in driving climate ambition. And I would like to exemplify this statement along 4 propositions, which are based on the experiences of the Ambition to Action projects and of NewClimate and the Co-Benefits project by ISS. And all the experiences that we have gained in running these projects with Germany's International Climate Initiative. What we see with this COP is that the social and economic co-benefits of climate action, for example, in the energy sector, are being increasingly considered and addressed in the revised NDCs. And what we observe is also an increased attention to co-benefits in climate ambition and action planning. And no matter the specific reasons, the results of the 2021 survey of NewClimate's NDC update report, which you see here on the screen, they present a real shift from previous editions. And for example, as see here, for example, in the 2018 survey, only half of the respondents stated that the benefits of mitigation action have been clearly and well articulated. The numbers you see now show that more than 80% of the respondents of the current NDC update report, which have been done by our friends from NewClimate, they indicated that co-benefits have been considered in the NDC update. And more than 65% indicated that there are efforts to quantify the NDC co-benefits. Next slide, please. And what we also see is that also research on the co-benefits has been rapidly progressing and resulting in an increasing but also country-specific evidence that the 1.5 pathway is not only vital in the long term, but also generates clearly near-term co-benefits for people, communities, and economies. Next slide, please. In this COP, the ISS has just presented results from our own work in the co-benefits project, and Philip has already shared some thoughts on that in his opening remark. And in these presentations, we quantified how renewable energy can contribute to the local value creation and employment, and energy security in South Africa's coal regions. And we have clearly country-specific evidence and data that will be needed to also successfully implement the New Deal between the governments of South Africa, of Germany, the EU, and many other countries to support a timely and a socially just coal phase out in the country. Next slide. Project under leadership of NewClimate have provided important evidence on the co-benefits to governments. And I'm really looking forward to their presentation later on, where they will exemplify that and talk more in detail on the latest results from the work in Kenya, which you have briefly displayed on this slide. Next slide, please. Now, but let's take a moment to talk about climate communication and how co-benefits are relevant to that. If you look at this picture, does that make you feel worried about climate change? For most people, it has that effect. So probably it makes you worry about climate change. But if we ask people if such an image would motivate them to act, or if we look how it motivates them to act, we see, according to current communication research, probably it doesn't so much. So why is that? From communication research, we know that while addressing also the catastrophic impacts of a runaway climate change, it's important to gain public attention, even to get people on the table to address this issue. It's not sufficient to trigger climate action. And this is where the co-benefits narrative comes in. Next slide, please. What we find also in communication research is that it's important to address also the positive opportunities, and they are necessary to move from climate awareness to climate action. And my colleague Laura Nadel has prepared an excellent paper on that, which we've displayed here on the slide, which you're also happy to download on our website. Next slide, please. Now, while the co-benefits narrative can be powerful, it of course should not be used as a smokescreen to cover up inaction or delay, because eventually we need to be aware it's actions that matter. And there are many opportunities for climate and development goals to align, such as health benefits, economic value creation for communities, cost savings. But we are running out of time and we need to be conscious about that. So we no longer have the luxury to focus only on win-win propositions or to postpone decisions on climate action until innovation brings down the cost of climate action in every single sector. And I guess Ms. Thunberg in her speech gave us an important reminder when she was talking about the failure of climate policy in her blah, blah, blah speech on empty words and promises. Next slide, please. So to make a powerful and serious argument, we need facts on the opportunities, and we need to be country specific. In looking ahead, we expect co-benefits analysis to be especially relevant for NDC implementation through local climate action and for planning inclusive and fair transitions. Then the co-benefits assessment can provide the basis for enabling policies which maximize the number of winners and minimizes the number of losers, for example, through skill training and gender-inclusive career development. Also, the deal with South Africa I was talking about to support the coal phase-out in the country would not have been possible without sound and reliable co-benefits assessment and expert organizations internationally and in South Africa. Now, talking about sound tools, talking about reliable co-benefits assessments and expert organization brings me to the concluding chapter of this opening presentation I've been extremely looking forward to over the last months, which is the official launch of the 2021-2022 edition of our Sustainable Energy Jobs Factsheet series, together with the IRENA Coalition for Action. And it's my big pleasure to introduce to you Ulrike Lehr, who's the head of socioeconomics at the International Renewable Energy Agency's IRENA, and she's senior advisor on socioeconomic co-benefits to the Sustainable Energy Jobs Working Group in the IRENA Coalition for Action, in which we are proudly participating as ISS. The IRENA Coalition for Action, for those of you who don't know it yet, forms a key international network to discuss industry trends, to determine action, share knowledge, and exchange best practices with a vision to drive the global energy transition in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. And the coalition brings together 120 leading renewable energy players, including research institutes, intergovernmental organizations, civil society, private sector companies, and industry associations. And the IRENA Coalition for Action have just launched also a call for action on renewable energy jobs for a just and inclusive energy transition. Ulrike, I'm very happy to give the floor to you.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thanks for the kind introduction and thank you for your words. Well, IRENA, this October, we at IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, have published our 2021 annual review on renewable energy jobs. That's the 8th edition of this annual review. And for 2020, this review reports 12 million people employed in the renewable energy sector around the globe. That's fair to say that renewable energy are true jobs motors. Meanwhile, most governments recognize that the energy pathway they choose not only has an impact on combating global warming and meeting climate goals. The energy pathway chosen will also define the basis for their country's future development. Renewables can lead to sustainable and decent jobs and improve the gender balance, as Sebastian already has mentioned, in the future energy sector. To harness the future potential of the social and economic co-benefits of renewables, of course, decision makers and all the stakeholders, agents involved, need reliable data. And they need trusted expert organizations to facilitate sound assessments. Decision makers also depend on reliable data, on tools, on networks of trusted expert organizations to build the skill base that is needed to make the energy transition happen. And not only make it happen, but also make the energy transition to renewable energy a success for many, make it widely accepted, and make it just and equitable. And while so many efforts are being undertaken to develop such tools and to acquire country-specific, global, region-specific employment data, there still is a huge gap between those who decide and those who calculate, the expert organizations as suppliers of this information. Now, the IRENA Coalition for Action and the Co-Benefits Project have decided to jointly address and close this gap. And on the next slide, we would like to show you how. Over to you again, Sebastian.
Thank you, Ulrike. Now, with this joint fact sheet series with the IRENA Coalition for Action and the Co-Benefits Project, we present to you the state of the art in assessing employment co-benefits, in interconnecting climate-friendly power system planning and sustainable job creation. The 2021-2022 fact sheet edition connects policymakers in local and national governments agencies with expert organizations to close the gap which Ulrike has described. Addressing questions like what tools are actually available to quantify the potential of renewables to create jobs in your country? What do recent studies say on job potentials as well as on existing challenges? Who do you want to call or email to plan your own employment assessment? We hope very much that this new fact sheet edition inspires expert organizations and scientists to intensify the important work on the multiple social and economic co-benefits of renewable energy. We also hope that this fact sheet edition inspires policymakers to raise ambition in climate mitigation efforts and work towards a rapid decarbonization of energy and power sectors, and to work to make the Paris Agreement a success for the planet, for the people, communities in our countries. So here you go, the 2021-2022 fact sheet edition by Co-Benefits Project and IRENA Coalition for Action is now online and ready to be used. Thanks a lot. And thanks Ulrike for this wonderful collaboration.
Thank you, Sebastian, and thank you, Ulrike. Also, many thanks, Ulrike, for joining us from Abu Dhabi at such a late time for you, and of course, congratulations on this launch. I would now like to hand over to my colleague Harry Farnihoff, who leads our co-benefits or work on the assessment of broader non-climatic impacts at the NewClimate Institute, to talk a little bit about the tools that we have been developing, and then also some of the results and analysis that we have been doing in Kenya. Harry, please.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing, particularly in the Ambition to Action project, but also in related initiatives, looking at assessing sustainable development impacts of climate action, and then focus on some examples of analysis we've done in Kenya to hopefully transition nicely into the panel discussion that follows. So we have a benefits work stream within this project, and we've really aimed to develop a set of tools or a toolbox to facilitate quantification, in particular, of sustainable development impacts, and use that and try to embed that into national planning processes, as well as make them available for wider use from the range of different stakeholders. We've developed, more or less this toolbox that goes from the sort of identification of some of the key links, synergies, and also as well as trade-offs between mitigation measures and the sustainable development goals. And we've developed tools, mostly Excel-based, they're open source, also some with web interfaces, looking at economic impacts, looking at green recovery, trades, and in particular, looking in the energy sector and electricity supply and transport, particularly at jobs and health implications. When we look at the energy sector, it's very clear that measures to drive down emissions can influence, both in positive and as well as potentially negative ways all of the headline sustainable development goals. There are these clear links. Some are perhaps more critical than others. Some are perhaps also easier to identify and analyze. And I'm going to talk particularly about 3 that we've focused on in Kenya, but also in a number of other countries. So the first of these links is really to SDG 3, focusing on good health and well-being. The second, SDG 7, affordable and clean energy. And the third, SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. The first example I wanted to highlight is some work we did in the Kenyan context, looking at the impacts of different pathways for electricity supply in Kenya. So today, Kenya has a very low carbon electricity supply, or relatively low, but it's faced with the challenge of growing demand, or expectation of growing demand, and needing to build the supply to meet that, particularly through population growth, as well as increasing access and the reliability of that access. And we did a study. We looked at comparing investments in new geothermal plants to new coal plants. So Kenya has relatively abundant and underexploited geothermal resources in the Rift Valley, so estimated on the order of 10 gigawatts. But there have also been plans, and I think we'll hear a bit more about it later, so hopefully less promising plans, let's say, to actually introduce coal into the electricity supply mix. A relatively high-profile case in Lamu, backed with significant, or previously backed with significant Chinese investments, but also some smaller units at Kitui. So we looked at what are the potential implications of these 2 different technologies to offer or to meet increasing electricity demand. And a clear finding from this analysis, we were working with partners looking at electricity system modeling, that aside from the obvious but important to point out climate implications, so investing in coal would significantly undermine and threaten the national ability to meet Kenya's NDC and its targets for cutting emissions. But geothermal actually offers lower cost option, and also new plants could be designed with greater flexibility, so to meet some of the dynamics of demand and fluctuating demand. We also looked at jobs. We applied our economic impact model, looking at jobs in the construction, the operation of these units, as well as further upstream in the supply chains of these technologies. And we found that actually investments in geothermal could drive on the order of 3 times more domestic jobs, so jobs in Kenya, per megawatt. And crucially, this is employment that is building or supply chains that are aligned with low emission trajectories. So these are sustainable jobs. These are jobs in technologies that we know we're going to need for the coming decades. And we also looked at some of the health implications, so the health impacts of developing new coal plants. This slide just shows the tool that we used and we've developed under this project, Paulin, the air pollution impact model for electricity supply. And this is a web interface for it that allows access to look at a selection of indicators. And these are on the map here, the planned or proposed units that could be developed. And we looked at the emissions and the air pollution emissions over the potential lifetime of these projects, and found that not building them, not operating them, could save on the order of over 60,000 years of life, both in Kenya and also in neighboring countries. Turning a bit more to the demand side of things, we did a study recently looking at residential cooking, and So residential cooking accounts for on the order of 1/4 of national greenhouse gas emissions in Kenya. So it's really important. It's an important area to tackle, but it's an important area to tackle not only for climate reasons, but also critically for health reasons. There are national estimates that indicate on the order of 20,000 premature deaths per year occur through household cooking. 20,000. This is a really important area. We did some scenario modeling. We looked at deployment of different technologies, and there's a whole study behind this, but I think the important point to highlight that in ambitious scenarios with deploying some of the lowest carbon options, mainly electrification of cooking appliances, we estimated could save on the order of 500,000, so avoid 500,000 premature deaths to mid-century. So this is, just for order of magnitude, approximately 1% of today's population in Kenya. This is really material, and I think also important to add that overwhelmingly the burden of these implications fall on women and children in particular. Some of that analysis is looking very much at the national level and kind of trying to inform the planning process. And I wanted to also just touch on some really important work that is much more focused at the local level and community level that Sebastian, who was talking earlier, and the co-benefits team are doing at the moment. So this is a case study in the Lamu region. This is where one of the coal plants was proposed, at least to be built. And they're looking at kind of assessing the social performance and the engagement of investments in renewable energy in this area with communities. The conclusions or interim conclusions from this work really suggest here, addressing the social performance of energy sector investments. So these are the extent to which they can deliver benefits, but also safeguard against negative outcomes, is really important in reconciling climate action with community needs. They found, perhaps unsurprisingly, but that's an important message, that there's an acute lack of evidence. So on how these investments perform for communities, particularly in terms of important indicators such as jobs, energy access, health, etc. And one of the key recommendations from this work so far, and I think there will be more coming out of it, is that international investments should strengthen the social performance for communities while facilitating climate action. And I think to conclude, I would kind of also take that message, but bring it not necessarily in the energy sector, not necessarily for Kenya, but we know that we need to implement urgent climate action at a scale and speed completely unprecedented, impossible or difficult, even challenging to imagine. And what will be critical, if there is any chance of success in that process, is really this engagement of sharing information and ensuring participation at all levels of governance, but also with the communities and ensuring that they're participating in the decision-making process. That's, I think, critical to enabling sustainable climate action that will actually really deliver. That's it for me. I think we'll hand back to
Thank you.
Frauke.
Thank you, Harry, for these insights. We'll move now to the panel discussion part of this session. The physical panel here in Glasgow, but also joined by Sebastian and Ulrike on the virtual panel, so to speak, unfortunately not constantly visible, but when they speak. We wanted to go a bit deeper into the discussion on the role of co-benefits in policy planning, in particular in the energy sector, and perhaps starting starting with Kenya. And I would first like to introduce our two panelists here. To my left, Paul Bhuti. Paul is Deputy Director of Renewable Energy at the Ministry of Energy in Kenya. He has vast experience, over 30 years of experience at the Ministry of Energy, working on different aspects around renewable energy in his country, also handling integration of climate change perspectives in energy planning and energy strategy development. He is also lead author in the IPCC and a member of the multi-stakeholder technical advisory group on the SDG 7 on energy, clean energy access. To my right is Omar El-Mawi, sorry. Omar is, and I like that by his own description, a highly motivated and enthusiastic lawyer with various years of experience in the field. He's very knowledgeable on energy, climate change, environmental laws, and has dedicated his career towards supporting marginalized communities to safeguard and enforce their rights. He currently coordinates the Stop ECOP campaign, a campaign pushing to stop the world's longest oil pipeline in Africa, in East Africa, if constructed, and was also the Decolonize campaign coordinator, a movement that pushes for green and sustainable energy future for Kenya. But so starting perhaps with you, Paul, with the perspective of the government, and perhaps you can share some insights in how far the co-benefits analysis and evidence of co-benefits has informed energy policy planning and the role of that in planning processes in the government.
Thank you very much and for having me, and also thank you for your kind words. Yes, from a government perspective, I do work for the Ministry of Energy. Let me first of all just indicate that the co-benefit analysis has not been significantly being done, as an everyday thing, but the macro policies speak about some of these benefits which we need to ensure they can be finding expression into the sectoral policies. The energy policy that we are currently implementing, which is 2018, actually has some implicit provision because it says the overall objective is to provide and ensure affordable, competitive, sustainable, and reliable supply of energy at least cost while protecting the environment. And I think that statement implicitly brings out some of the target co-benefits because you're looking at the environmental benefits and you're also looking at the social benefits that will accrue from ensuring that Kenyans can be able to access these affordable and competitive sustainable energy. Now, looking at this now deeply in terms of looking at the direct, the indirect, and induced benefits that would accrue by our climate actions in terms of promoting renewable energy. I think this is an area where in the recent time our attention has been called to, and we have pieces of work that has been done in trying to quantify these core benefits, because many times these are found in the macro policy documents, like the Kenyan Vision 2030 has a big, broad objective of ensuring that all the development activities are able to provide the requisite benefits to the citizens. And that, of course, includes the health benefits, the environmental benefits, as well as the critical benefit of jobs, because unemployment is a serious problem in the country, and therefore this becomes a fundamental issue of concern. Now, looking at it now deeply in terms of what we are doing in promoting access to renewable energy, particularly now looking at the health side of things, we are electrifying health facilities. And by electrifying health facilities, there are accruing benefits which citizens can be able to enjoy. And that is improved health, reduced, of course, mortality, morbidity, because of related. And in the recent times, we have prepared a bioenergy strategy. And this strategy is speaking about access to clean cooking. Now, access to clean cooking, by its own definition, means that people can now transition to cleaner forms and therefore reduce the health adverse impacts and therefore get the benefits of employment. And we are thinking that this kind of attention to transitioning to clean cooking and the recent understanding of the need to use certain tools to quantify these benefits, because one needs to actively do the analysis. You need to do a scoping to understand what are these benefits, what are the impacts, and then you do an in-depth analysis of the same to know what are the indicators in terms of quantifications. And this is where we are saying the work that IRENA has been doing globally has been useful to us, because now we can begin to see jobs that are accruing from the sector. And not only just that, we also need to look at the gender aspects into the jobs so that we know to what extent these benefits are being accruing to both women, men, and youth. Finally, if I make the last point on this, is our energy policy has made also specific provisions where it speaks about the sharing of benefits from the energy resources. That is a section 9.7 of the policy. And in this sense, it's talking about employment, technology transfer, the profits that entrepreneurs will make because they improve livelihoods, and these are benefits that would accrue. So to that extent, yes, some bit of that is available, but the active use of tools to assess and quantify these benefits, I think, is still an area which is work in progress, and a lot needs to be done. And of course, we take into account the need now for integrated power systems planning, energy planning, where you now want to factor all these very essential components in order finally to be able to tell how are you progressing in making these benefits apparent to the consumers and available to the citizens. So these are the kind of the broader things that the government now is thinking about. We've just submitted an energy compact on cooking. And this compact is speaking to some of these very direct benefits that come from the improved access to clean cooking. And so we believe by so doing, there is going to be a progressive shift in terms of ensuring we can measure the benefits, and we can also quantify the adverse the adverse impacts, which then we need to really get a balance. Because at the end of the day, it's a question of the gross and net effects that come from these interventions. Sometimes you may find by going renewable, you also have to lose jobs from the other sides. So you need to look at, on a net basis, what are the net effects in terms of the core benefits. And I believe that is a work in progress that is going to inform the future policy reviews, the strategies that we are preparing, so that we can be now more focused into the benefits. Let me hold it there for now.
Thank you, Paul, for these insights. But yes, you're absolutely right. No, it's not only about the benefits, but it's really understanding what the impacts are, what the trade-offs are. The benefits, of course, as well, to maximize those, no, in the transition, in the policy planning, but also to manage potential trade-offs, no. And as you said, there will also be losses, no, that needs to be addressed. If I can just follow up on one point that you said it's so far, you spoke about the priority benefits areas, health, employment, also related to gender, but that it's still not so widely applied, no, and in government. What are the main challenges there, or what would you see could be done to help that?
The first thing that you consider if you look at the challenges, first of all, is the low levels of awareness. And that awareness begins from the policy making. Because even for policy makers to be focused on some of these very direct issues that they need to quantify, that requires a level of awareness. And also the consumers, the levels of awareness about the benefits of transitioning to cleaner energy sources is something that is of essence. I think the analysis that was given of the Lamu coal, because everybody, of course, is aware that coal is a polluting energy source. And how many people are aware of the adverse impacts of going that route of coal? Not many, because the levels of awareness are low. Second point is these benefits cut across sectors. And we have sort of segmented sectoral planning, which means when health sector is doing their planning, they are not mindful of the energy issues that they need to address. So that segmentation then brings a challenge, because we are not able to integrate all this, because all these factors are actually very intertwined. And one needs to see, if you're making a policy on health, on public health education, are you also addressing the energy issues, the barriers that need to be known to the people? These are other things. And then, of course, the other challenge is the political goodwill. Sometimes it becomes a barrier, because if the leadership doesn't get to give the right political signals, then some of these extent to which it can be done, even though technically one knows it can be done, you also need to be enabled in terms of budget allocations. You need to be given that space. And finally, the issue of financing is also crucial, because for you to undertake detailed impact analysis, you actually need to be facilitated. And that is what is also in sometimes very low to access. And that also brings in the issue of investments. How many private sector entities are willing to invest in the renewable energy solutions? And if you do not get robust sort of investment landscape, then it means then the status quo continues, and then which means these benefits cannot accrue. So as we now look at the climate mitigation, any climate adaptation, then we need to be conscious that financing becomes a critical element that must be available to facilitate such a process. So that is, in brief, what I would see as some of the challenges which can be said about. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Perhaps moving to you, Omar, and the civil society perspective, no? And with your experience as a campaigner against fossil fuel infrastructure in Kenya, what has the role of co-benefits been in your work, and the evidence of benefits to support you in that?
Thank you. Definitely, I think for us, the issues about core benefits and utilizing some of the tools that are available have been really great to give us the information and knowledge to be able to buttress our points when we're speaking against some of these fossil fuel projects. I mean, it's taken us now, we've been able to resist fossil fuels like coal in Kenya since 2014 when it was first being proposed. 8 years later, some of these tools have enabled us to convince the government, among other reasons I would assume, to be able to ask for specific checks by having, power purchase agreement task forces to look at all power purchase agreements of electricity within Kenya to make a decision of why we're still paying a lot of money as far as electricity tariffs are concerned, and what would be the reasons. It's been a very good way of also in many ways convincing our government to come up with commitments to try and push towards 100% renewable energy transition by 2030. Most of the reasons why the government really decided to hear us and make some of these decisions have been the fact that we've been able to show them it's not just about avoiding emissions, but in doing so, it's an opportunity for them to leapfrog fossil fuels, but also to create job opportunities, to be able to save a lot of money that they would have spent in terms of covering for people's health costs when they're getting sick. It's also been a good way of showing them that we'll be employing, like the geothermal comparison to coal that was done, was able to show that the geothermal sector would be employing 3 times more people than what the coal sector would be employing. So all these arguments have been able to really show and buttress our issues around that, not going the fossil fuels way and investing more in just renewable energy transition. It's not just about emissions and impacts and environmental impacts, but actually going to be a lot of money that the government is saving and also making at the same time.
And I mean, you speak about governments and influencing or persuading governments to act. And how far has co-benefits or this narrative around the benefits also, and how far does it play a role in society? Do you also kind of see an increasing awareness or an engagement at that level, or is that still not the case?
Yeah, I think the tools have been really helpful because, and I'm sure all of you will agree with me, doing most of these analyses are quite an expensive venture. And the thing is, within the civil society organizations, whatever we're able to fundraise and get as resources, we're not able to do all these, clear analysis to be able to show the issues. So I think how it has really helped is that it's really generated or helped us to have a multi-stakeholder approach, whereby, because you are dealing with both the government and the CSOs, and when it comes to a point where we are all in agreement about the basis of how we should be doing these assessments, it's really easy for us to accept that this is the bigger picture and this is the way to go. Yet there definitely are challenges in the way, and my good friend from the Ministry of Energy has been able to explain some of these, in terms of one, we have been struggling a lot as far as access to information is concerned. And to be able to do these assessments without knowing what are even the plans, what are the issues, it's really hard to be able to make the assessment. So this process has helped us to get most of this information, and definitely it has helped a lot. There's the issue about the political goodwill, which is also talked about. It's a huge challenge because we have different ministries within the country. And to an extent, most of these ministries sometimes make plans in exclusion of others. So they're not necessarily doing the extensive consultation that's supposed to happen. So at the end of the day, all these impacts we're talking about, which eventually culminate to finances, which the taxpayers are the ones that are facing the brunt, are affecting all of us because people have not been able to do all this extensive consultation. But then with having such kind of tools and making sure that everyone can get access to them, it's really an easy way of all of us making the case, and it's hard for either of the other side to really say or move to blame games because we are all reading from the same chapter in many ways, and therefore when we are coming up with the solutions, we are also sure that we won't have as much resistance from each of the parties.
And is it also the benefits analysis now in your current work on the, out of curiosity, on the oil pipeline? Is that something where you are looking also at the wider impacts and using that as one of the arguments for your campaign?
It certainly is. I mean, it's, and I couldn't stress this even further. It's definitely not enough to tell people that they're going to cause, environmental impacts. This amount of carbon emissions are going to be coming up from the project once the oil is explored. It's not enough to say these many people will be displaced, because at the end of the day, the other side are saying we will be generating this much employment opportunities, we will be generating jobs for the country, revenue, so that the country can progress. So it's only by putting the case of that not extracting the oil and doing an alternative will be making more sense for the governments. It's the only way that we can really convince them that investing or withdrawing investments in these projects and into the alternatives is the best way to go. That's what we've been doing, and it's one of the reasons why we've been able to, even in Kenya, convince the government to this date not to build the coal plant in Lamu, because, in honesty, if they wanted to do it, we would be having a coal plant in Lamu right now as I'm speaking to you.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe we just briefly pause here and just see if there are any questions, perhaps from you here in Glasgow in the audience. I was told there's also the opportunity to ask questions online, and then it will pop up here. But perhaps if there are any questions at this point then yeah, please, you can step up to the microphone. Remove the mask, exactly. Please say.
Good evening. I'm Joe Ravitz from the University of Manchester in the UK. And I'm here to work on a theory of climate change policy, which starts with the big bad world of power games and corruption, and extractive finance, and so on. Trying to draw systems maps of these very difficult problems. And sorry I was late, but I saw the co-benefit tool. It looks beautiful. And then I asked myself, does this fit with the world as I know it, which has all of these very difficult challenges all around? Some more in some countries, but yeah, they're everywhere. Any advice from the panel on that, particularly from the Kenya example? It sounds great, and I appreciate your wisdom on this.
Harry, perhaps one for you to pick up.
Yeah, I mean, I can come with a try to answer that. I think what we're trying to do, and we have a range of tools, and I mean, there are an increasing body of information from a lot of different organizations in this area, and I think one of the key objectives of this, what Omar just said, is shedding light on some of these impacts, providing access to this information, ensuring that that's part of the discussion, and so often in the past that hasn't been the case, and particularly when we look at a lot of investments in across all of the different fossil fuels, there has been this overwhelming narrative of both the jobs that it creates. Jobs is typically the big one, the one that grabs headlines, but also looking at the negative side and the jobs that would be lost should we be phasing out, etc. And that's not so much the case in the Kenyan context, but elsewhere. And I think it's a really critical part of the narrative that was missing, and I think is increasingly, and particularly the work that IRENA are doing, really filling that gap and showcasing that's simply not the case. There are two sides to the story, and there needs to be an understanding of both of these to ensure that we we can maximize these opportunities, but also find ways to address and compensate and look for paths that ensure that, and as Sebastian was saying earlier, that those that stand to lose out are really brought along and part of that. And I think it's shedding information, and I think that's what's missing, or at least where we're trying to fill gaps.
Perhaps before moving to another question, Omar just wanted to come very...
Yeah, and I definitely get where you're coming from. I mean, the thing is, we're not saying that we're besties with government, yeah? It's not like this will make us friends. There are things that we don't agree with. But we also feel that it shouldn't always be about fighting if there are ways of resolving some of these things in a more of like rational manner. And therefore for us, Kenya, we've had it a little bit easy because one, we've already made a lot of progress as far as renewable energy is concerned. I mean, we are more than 90% currently. Our president has already made a commitment here in Glasgow that will be 100% by 2030. But the thing is, I think, and we've seen it a lot. So it's not just about you know, being nemesis, but if there are ways of sitting down, of agreeing some of the modalities of how to do these issues, it's really a very good way of ensuring that we reach to a position where everyone, it's a win-win situation. And for us, you know, we know that those in government are not robots. You know, they are people who we are related to. We have sisters, brothers, and aunties and other relatives. And therefore, we believe that if we at least come up in a way of rationalizing on the issues in an agreeable manner, it becomes easier to reach out to solutions that maybe they are not everyone is happy, but at least we are not getting to a position where, you know, one is taking all and the other is losing up on everything else.
Thank you, Omar. And there's another question.
Yeah, hi. I'm George Thurston from the New York University School of Medicine. And for the past few decades, I've been studying the health effects of particles and the different types of particles and their adverse health effects. And you know, it's really great to see that science, you know, the science, because I know most of these health impacts of coal are from the particulate matter that comes out of the stacks and that people breathe. And it's great to see the science being put into a useful form for policy making, so that we're just not talking theoretically, but getting actual numbers. But my research and that of many others have found that when you're talking about coal specifically, those particles are far more toxic than your everyday particles. And I think generally what's done, and I'm guessing this case, but in almost all cases, they use an average toxicity for the particles. So I'm just wondering if there's going to be any effort to try and, when we're looking at fossil fuels, we're looking at particles that are many times as toxic per pound than regular particles. So I don't think it would change the conclusions of this work at all, but it would make the benefits far more, outweighing the costs even more. Is there a way maybe to do that? I just want to get that on the record for one thing, and then maybe see if there's any thoughts about how we can sort of beef up these estimates with estimates of the adverse health effects of fossil fuels that are even bigger, and therefore leading to bigger health benefits of not burning them.
I don't know, Harry, if you want to comment on that.
I do shortly, not to dominate the discussion, because I know that George is right, and we've been talking about this, and I think this is important, and I think some of the showcase, or some of the aspects we're showcasing here is using relatively simple approaches and trying to get the narrative on the page. And I think we need to go a lot further. We need to go a lot further across different sectors to provide much better information. I think that's clear. I think we're at the start, in fact, and that's a shame. The health picture hasn't been part of the climate narrative sufficiently. It's getting there. I think we're seeing more of it, but yeah, we need to do more, I think, and to make this accessible to decision makers.
I'd like to now bring in our virtual panelists again, Ulrike and Sebastian, moving perhaps from the health impact focus back to employment and to jobs. And Ulrike, maybe just I'd be interested to know a little bit more about the work of the Coalition for Sustainable Energy Jobs, the working group. Maybe if you can share, what the theory of change is, some success stories, but also challenges that you see on the horizon, also opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Frauke, for that question. Now, we at the Sustainable Energy Jobs Group, we have found together to basically collect institutions that are already busy with identifying the benefits and the co-benefits, in particular in terms of decent jobs. And we have members such as the ILO, who has been busy, very, very busy with the definition of decent jobs. We have members that are more focusing on access, such as Power for All. We have members that are focusing more on general research, such as my colleague Sebastian. And we have the Women Net. We have a lot of different stakeholders. And the idea was to streamline the message so that it can be understood, because we have the joint notion that jobs is a unit and a denomination almost that everybody understands. There are a lot of countries that are struggling with unemployment, so increased employment is a message that everybody understands. You obviously have to be fair, and I was happy that IRENA's work has been mentioned quite often now, that we are looking at the net benefits also, not only in the discussions we are having in the coalition, but also in the general work that we are doing on economics of energy transitions. And I'm happy to share also here that we are currently doing a report on Africa, which will be launched mid-January, which does exactly that. It looks at the African continent and 5 sub-regions and identifies a lot of the co-benefits. It identifies economic impacts such as GDP. It identifies additional jobs economy-wide or in the energy sector. It also looks at finance and at the policy framework to make this just and make the transition just and equitable. Now, from this just and equitable, let me come back to what we are doing at the coalition now. As has been said initially, we have been launching the call for decent jobs and for sustainable energy jobs and for action, basically. And we are also trying to develop joint methodology to streamline the terms in which we talk about job creation and so on, to just make our overall narrative better understood, to reach more people, also to reach maybe young people, to reach decision makers, but also to reach the people on the ground who are afraid of the energy transition because they might fear that they are losing their jobs, and to just really very openly discuss reskill possibilities, retraining, social security measures, and so on. I leave it here.
Thank you, Ulrike. Sebastian, I also want to give you the opportunity to come in again and reflect a bit on the discussions that we've had so far, and how that may influence also your work going forward.
Well, thank you, Frauke. What we really have to understand is that renewable energy as one key area of climate action is not only different from fossil energy in terms of technology, and in terms of how you implement it distributed versus centralized. But it's also very different in terms of the social and economic impact it has. And one of the key differences is exactly for the distributed nature and the smaller scale nature that renewable energy allow. And that means that also the socioeconomic impacts and benefits, they are different in that they are also distributed more widely, or they can be distributed more widely if you plan your energy system based on renewables in a smart way. And so that means when we're developing energy systems with renewables, we need to take into account these different characteristics. And we need to take into account the second thing. If we talk about local benefits, about social performance of renewable energy for communities on the ground, it is essential that we get communities into the conversation and ask them, what are your expectations? What are the benefits that would be important to you? And then to make sure that when we're planning investments and when we're rolling out energy plans with renewables, that they take into account these community-specific needs and expectations. And this is exactly what we're trying to contribute also with our work in Kenya. I'm very happy that we have also Omar on board in our council advising us on that, and also the Ministry of Energy. Because while it's very important to have also global numbers, and IRENA is doing fantastic work on that, when you're going down to the local level and national level, trying to understand what are the community needs and how you can fulfill them with climate action, with renewable energies. Then, of course, you need to bring in these communities. So the assessments need to be very community specific. And this is something what we're currently doing with our work at the ISS together with our dear partners and friends in Kenya. And this is also something we're proposing in general, to have, like, really to put communities in the center and community needs and expectations in the center of renewable energy development, and also planning climate action to increasing social performance of climate action.
Yeah, thank you, Sebastian. I think that we're nearing the end of this session. I think from what we've heard, at least my takeaway, but also from the other discussions here, is that there is a great need to understand the broader impacts of transitions better, for the just transition, a greater information need. I think it also speaks to the implementation gap that we're seeing, where governments are struggling to translate their high ambitions into actually policies on the ground that can get implemented on the ground. To close the session, I just wanted to use the opportunity also to share work that we are also doing under the Ambition to Action project, which is the annual NDC update report. It's a little bit of a tangent here to this discussion, but it also looks at actually the role of benefits in NDC implementation and NDC updating. It is based largely on a survey that we do annually to look at, get inputs from countries around the world on the status of NDC implementation. And this particular edition looks at also the important role of subnational actors as well as the co-benefits. So I'd invite you to download the report. We don't have hard copies in the spirit of a paperless COP, but you can download that from the Ambition to Action website. And yeah, with that, I would like to close and thank especially the panelists who joined the session, Paul and Omar here and Harry in Glasgow, as well as Ulrike and Sebastian online. And yeah, thank you all for participating here and online, and have a good evening. Thank you very much.